From the perspective of others, Jacob and Alexa Monroe seemed like the perfect couple. Two successful, attractive individuals seemingly caught in an endless love affair. Their Instagram pages were filled with photos from luxury trips, extravagant anniversary celebrations, and romantic moments that painted a flawless picture of their lives. At family parties, they were always together, Jacob's arm around Alexa's waist, her smile warm and perfect. Jacob, 36, was a successful software engineer who had risen from nothing to everything through hard work and determination. A disciplined, loyal, and hard-working man, someone many women dreamed of having. He never forgot anniversaries, always remembered the little details that made Alexa happy, and did whatever it took to make her feel safe and secure. Alexa, 32, was a woman everyone admired. With her stunning beauty and unparalleled confidence, she always drew attention. She had a special talent for communication. Her smile, her gaze, her words, all of her was captivating and alluring. But beneath this calm exterior, something restless was hidden. Alexa craved excitement. She wanted novelty. She enjoyed the attention of others because it made her feel alive. For years, Jacob's love and the stability of their life had been enough for her. But now it wasn't. The cracks in their relationship started out subtly. Nights when Jacob, after a long day at work, no longer spent hours talking to her as he used to. Instances when their intimacy diminished, not out of indifference, but because of the pressures of life. Jacob didn't notice the changes, but Alexa did. She felt that their conversations had become predictable, that Jacob's touches no longer carried the passion they once did. At first, she tried to convince herself that this was normal. After all, didn't all marriages move past the honeymoon phase eventually? But as time went on, the sense of emptiness inside her grew stronger. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the good things in their life. Jacob's kindness, his loyalty, his support. But through it all, one thought kept repeating in her mind. Is this all there is? She didn't tell Jacob anything. She convinced herself that she could suppress this feeling. But deep inside, she knew she wanted something more, something she couldn't yet clearly define. During these days, she decided to change her job. Her previous company had become a stifling, toxic environment. Endless office politics, never-ending meetings, and coworkers who merely passed the days. When she received a job offer from a prestigious, large company, she saw it as an opportunity for a fresh start. Jacob, as always, was her biggest supporter. "You deserve the best," he told her. "That old job has been draining you for a long time. This change will be great for you." Alexa smiled, grateful for her husband's support. But neither of them knew that this change would transform everything. The first thing that caught Alexa's attention in the new environment was the different energy there. Unlike her old workplace, which was filled with tired, soulless people, this one was dynamic and full of ambition. And within this atmosphere, there were men who had a confidence far beyond what Jacob had. It all started with fleeting glances and accidental smiles. A brief comment by the coffee machine, a casual encounter in the hallway. Alexa had always enjoyed the attention of others, but this time it felt different. These men were attractive, elegant, self-assured, and exuded a quiet authority that Jacob never had. There was a certain command in their demeanor that drew Alexa in, something that made her feel young again. At first, it was only curiosity, but curiosity always paves the way for more dangerous things. And soon, Alexa found herself caught up in something that had no way back, a world of temptation, deceit, and decisions that would forever change her fate. What seemed like a flawless life on the surface would soon collapse in the face of a bitter reality. The first person to test the boundaries was Jason. One afternoon, as Alexa stood by the coffee machine, Jason, with a mysterious smile, said, "You know, if we weren't coworkers, I'd ask you to go out with me without a second thought." Alexa laughed, as if it was a harmless joke. Good thing we're coworkers then. But she didn't cut the conversation short. She enjoyed the way Jason looked at her, the hidden suggestions in his tone. That feeling stirred something inside her that had been dormant for years. Excitement. And then there was Ethan, another colleague who always seemed to find a reason to get closer to her. "You always smell amazing, Alexa," he said one day, so close that his breath brushed against her skin. Alexa felt her heartbeat quicken. With a playful smile, she replied, "I try." Everything seemed harmless, or at least she convinced herself it was. But deep down, something was changing. Alexa had always seen herself as a faithful woman, someone who would never step outside the boundaries of her marriage. But the more she played along with these small games, the more she realized how much she longed to feel desired. Yes, Jacob loved her, but he had become predictable. Life with him was like reading a chapter where you already knew every detail. But these men? They were different. They reminded her that she wasn't just a wife. She was a woman. And then came the company party. It was supposed to be a simple celebration. Drinks, music, co-workers laughing. But as the night wore on, Alexa found herself drinking more than usual. Alcohol had lowered her inhibitions. Suddenly, the looks directed at her, the attention she was receiving, felt more real than ever. Tonight, she wasn't just another co-worker. Tonight, she was an attractive, desired woman. The first to take advantage of this situation was Jason. He whispered in her ear, "You look incredible tonight." The warmth of his breath on her skin sent a spark through her. Ethan wasn't far behind. When he handed her another drink, his fingers lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. And when the night reached its peak, Alexa had lost all control. In that dimly lit restroom, she crossed a line she never thought she would. The boundaries blurred, the lines disappeared, and the world outside that moment no longer mattered. That night, she wasn't Jacob's wife anymore. She was a woman rediscovering a part of herself, a part that had been buried for years under the repetition of life. And once she crossed that line, she knew there was no turning back, because one night wasn't enough. The thrill, the danger, the pleasure that seeped deep into her soul had consumed her. Alexa had tasted the forbidden, and now she couldn't walk away from it. The morning after the party, Alexa woke with a slight headache and a lingering sensation throughout her body, a mixture of shame and passion. She lay beside Jacob in their bed, staring at his calm, sleeping face. She expected her guilt to overwhelm her. But what came instead was nothing. For the first time in years, when she looked at her husband, she felt nothing. Instead, her mind replayed the moments from the night before. Jason's hands firmly around her waist, Ethan's breath on her neck, the thrill of danger, the pleasure of breaking the rules. She had crossed a line she always thought was impossible to cross, but instead of regret, she felt something else, satisfaction. And deep inside, something had awakened, a hunger. At first, Alexa thought it was just a mistake, something she could bury in the corner of her mind and pretend had never happened. But the problem with forbidden pleasure is that it doesn't fade away. This pleasure calls to you. It beckons you. It reminds you that one time is never enough. And Alexa? She wasn't strong enough to resist. Her behavior at work changed. She became bolder, more confident. The small games that used to entertain her were no longer enough. Now her glances were more deliberate, her smiles full of promise. Her touches lingered longer than usual. And the men? They noticed, and they responded. It all started quietly. A stolen moment in the break room, a quick brush in an empty conference room, a lunch that turned into something more in the parking lot. At first, she kept count in her mind, 1, 2, 3, but after a while, it didn't matter anymore. She wasn't just cheating, she was hunting, and that power was intoxicating. Alexa was no longer just a married woman in a monotonous marriage. She was a woman who could have any man she wanted, and nothing, not even her past, could stop her now. Alexa was now a woman in control, a woman desired by many men. And the best part? No one suspected a thing. She had become a master of the double game. To Jacob, she remained the same loyal and caring wife. Every evening she came home, pretending to be exhausted from work. She cooked dinner for him, sat beside him on the couch, they watched movies together, and at night she would plant a gentle kiss on his forehead and wish him good night. But at that very moment, deep inside, she knew she had been in another man's arms just a few hours ago. Alexa had convinced herself that everything was under control. She told herself that as long as Jacob never found out, no one would be hurt. But secrets, no matter how well hidden, always find a way to come to light. Not all the men at the office were drawn to Alexa's charms. Nicholas was different. A quiet, serious man with strong morals. Nicholas had always been loyal to his longtime fiancée. Unlike his colleagues, he wasn't involved in office gossip or rumors, and he definitely wasn't about to play dangerous games with a married woman. And maybe that was why he was the first to notice Alexa's odd pattern. At first, he only heard whispers, coworkers talking in hushed voices about how Alexa had been getting too close to certain men. But after a while, he saw it for himself. Her long stares at Jason. Ethan's gaze, a look that went beyond mere friendship. And the other men, who would exchange smirks whenever they saw her. Something wasn't right. Nicholas kept his distance, but his curiosity grew. And then came that particular day. One of his friends, a security guard at the building, shared something strange with him. "Nick, you work with Alexa, right? There's something you need to know." His friend told him that Alexa had repeatedly entered forbidden areas of the building with different men, and every time she would come back a few minutes later, tucking her hair back in place, straightening her clothes. Nicholas was horrified. He wasn't a man to jump to conclusions, but this wasn't just an affair. This was an addiction, and for the first time he felt pity for Jacob. Nicholas had only met Jacob once at a company event, a polite, humble, respectful man. A man who, without a doubt, loved his wife. He deserved to know the truth. But Nicholas wasn't the type to expose someone without evidence. He decided to wait, to observe more carefully. So he started keeping an eye on Alexa. He noted the men she spent time with. He wrote down the times she disappeared from her desk. And eventually, he gained access to the company's internal messaging system. What he found took his breath away. Clear and explicit messages, plans for secret meetings, and even messages where Alexa talked about her new catches. Nicholas stared at the screen in disbelief. Then his eyes locked onto one particular message. "Last night with 6 guys. A new record. I feel amazing. No guilt whatsoever." Jacob still has no clue, LOL. What a fool. I could do this forever. Nicholas clenched his fists. This woman wasn't just cheating, she was laughing at her husband. She thought he was a fool. She was exploiting his trust. That was the moment Nicholas made his decision. He had to expose Alexa, but he had to be smart about it. If Alexa found out he was gathering information, she could twist the story, play the victim, even accuse Nicholas of harassment. So he did everything carefully and flawlessly. He created an anonymous email. He gathered all the evidence, the message screenshots, the security camera footage, even recordings of Alexa's conversations. And then he wrote an email to Jacob. Subject: "You need to see this. Jacob, I don't know you personally, but I know you deserve much better than this. Your wife is cheating on you in the worst way. I've sent you the evidence. I'm sorry you have to find out this way, but you deserve the truth." Then, with a deep breath, he pressed send. And at that very moment, the seemingly perfect world Alexa had built began to crumble. The next morning, Jacob received the email. At first, he thought it was just an irrelevant message or spam. But when he saw the subject line and the attached files, curiosity overtook him. And then his world collapsed. Jacob sat in the heavy silence of the room, his hands gripping the edges of the desk, his eyes staring into the darkness. The sound of the door opening gently reached his ears. Alexa entered, unaware of the storm waiting for her. She took off her shoes and placed her bag on the couch. As she headed toward the kitchen, Jacob's voice suddenly stopped her. "Alexa?" She stopped and turned toward the voice. "Jacob? Why are you sitting in the dark?" Jacob slowly lifted his head. His eyes were cold and emotionless, like frosted glass. "How many did you satisfy today?" His voice was quiet, but every word hit Alexa's heart like a blade. She tried to laugh, but her laugh was dry and artificial. "Jacob, what are you talking about? I don't understand." Jacob didn't blink. He took his phone out of his pocket, unlocked the screen, and played a video. A picture of Alexa appeared, naked, in the arms of another man. Then the next video, and the next. Each clip playing one after another, revealing Alexa's countless betrayals. Alexa's breath caught in her throat. She was trapped. Jacob stared at her, his face as cold and emotionless as stone. "You know what the worst part is? I gave you my heart. I trusted you." He shook his head. "And you laughed at me, mocked me, told your lover I was nothing." Alexa opened her mouth, searching for words, but found nothing to say. The evidence was undeniable. The only thing she could do was beg. "I know it was wrong from the start, but I couldn't stop myself." Tears streamed down her face. "Please, Jacob, can you forgive me if I beg?" Jacob let out a bitter laugh. "How shameless! After everything you've done, you still have the audacity to ask for forgiveness?" He reached toward the drawer of the desk and pulled out a gun. Alexa's eyes widened in horror. "Jacob, you don't have to do this." Jacob cut her off. "It's over for you." He raised the gun. Alexa screamed. The first shot sounded like the breaking of a lock. Alexa stumbled backward, her hands reaching out to Jacob, as if trying to grab something that no longer existed. Jacob advanced, each step heavy and decisive. The second, third, fourth shots. Each bullet was a memory, a betrayal, a lie. He shot each one as if he wanted to erase all those moments from her existence. Alexa fell to the ground, her body no longer able to resist. Jacob stood above her, the gun still in his hand. Alexa's eyes stared at him, but there was no light in them anymore. Jacob took a deep breath and fired the last bullet. This one was for himself, for everything he had lost. The silence afterward was deep and heavy. Jacob looked around, as if seeing their home for the first time. Now he had nothing left to lose. A strange peace flowed through him, a peace he hadn't felt in years. Jacob walked toward his phone and dialed 911. The emergency operator answered, "Emergency services, how can I help you?" Without hesitation, Jacob said, "I killed my wife." His voice was calm, but each word carried an eerie weight. The operator paused and replied, "Sir, please hold on. We'll send the police." Jacob closed his eyes and responded, "I'm waiting." Then he hung up the phone. He sat on the couch, placing the gun next to him. The weight of the hour that had passed pressed on his shoulders, but there was no fear in him. Only one thing remained: peace. 15 minutes later, the red and blue lights of the police cars shone through the windows. A voice from the loudspeaker shouted, "Jacob, come out with your hands up!" Jacob took a deep breath, stood up, and walked toward the door. When he stepped outside, the officers pointed their guns at him. Jacob raised his hands and said, "I'm unarmed. I surrender." The officers moved toward him and handcuffed him. One of them glanced inside the house and immediately stepped back from the horrifying scene. He muttered to himself, "What did he do to this place?" Jacob didn't respond, because in his mind he knew justice had been served. The courtroom was packed with people. Journalists, spectators, and Alexa's former colleagues sat in the seats, eager to hear the fate of the man who had murdered his wife. Jacob sat motionless in his seat, his face unreadable. The prosecutor described him as a jealous and unstable husband who had snapped. They showed horrifying photos of Alexa's corpse and emphasized the brutality of the attack. But Jacob's defense attorney had one trump card: the truth. The lawyer presented the evidence: videos, messages, and betrayals. They showed the jury who Alexa truly was. When the court listened to Alexa's own words about how she had mocked Jacob and proudly bragged about having relationships with over 150 men, everyone in the courtroom was shocked. For the first time, people saw Jacob not as a killer, but as a man who had been pushed beyond his limits. When Jacob stood on the witness stand, his voice was calm and controlled. He said, "What I did, I had to do. I gave Alexa everything: my love, my loyalty. And in return, she humiliated me. She cheated on me over and over again. I'm not saying what I did was right, but I can't say I regret it." A heavy silence filled the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Finally, the verdict was read: first-degree murder. The judge referred to Jacob's mental state and the intense emotional pressures he had endured, but the law still considered his actions a crime. Verdict: 25 years in prison. Jacob showed no reaction. As he left the courtroom, his eyes fell on Nicholas, the man who had exposed the truth. Stephen nodded in acknowledgement, and Jacob walked away slowly, knowing that even though he had lost his freedom, he had regained his self-respect. Alexa's story became a cautionary tale, a story of lust, obsession, and consequences. Her former colleagues whispered about her double life, about the darkness she had hidden behind her smile. Jacob, now behind bars, remained silent. He never spoke of Alexa, and he didn't dwell on the past, because for him, justice had been served. And in the end, he was certain of one thing that would never happen again: Alexa would never betray him again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us for more thrilling and captivating tales.